Okay, so so I coach what I would call underrepresented leaders and founders, and the reason for that is as a Black woman, growing up being coached, being in the industry. I worked in HR for a very long time, so I've been at senior levels in HR for a long time, and even when I was having coaching, executive coaching, there's something that people that come from those marginalized groups that we kind of need in terms of helping our mindset because of the kind of niche and bespoke things that we experience. Like I grew up being told I'm going to always have to work harder than somebody from a white background to get to the same level. And so there are a lot of things women are always, you know, we're brought up to kind of I guess, be behind men, even if it's not overtly. And then we have people with disabilities and, you know, the sort of things that they're having to deal with on a daily basis. And so I launched my coaching business to serve those groups and to help them to be able to buck the trend when it comes to senior leadership and when it comes to being founders in their businesses as well. So that's what I do. And I also strategize. So I help businesses with DEI and belonging strategy. And I train and I speak. And so, yeah, I'm here to really help people to bring their difference, to learn how to harness their difference and to use it to really boost their careers.
That is so awesome. And we're so grateful to have you here today. So thank you for making the time, Dawn. So
thank you.
Oh, yeah, of course. So let's start with the basics. So teach me as if I don't know, and maybe I'm someone that hasn't experienced what a microaggression is. And maybe we can, you know, the topic is don't touch my hair. Maybe some people don't know what that means. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit to kick us off.
Yeah, so there are a lot of definitions for microaggressions. So Cambridge Dictionary is a clearer version, and it defines them as a small act or a remark that makes someone feel insulted or treated badly because of their race or their sex or something like that. And it might not be intended, it may not be intentional, but the results can have an effect. So when I talk about things like don't touch my hair, what we find a lot of us as Black women is that since I was younger at school, I'd get the credit, I'd come in and I'd have a new hairstyle, and then somebody will be like, oh, you know, that looks really nice, or how long did that take? Or it would be something along those lines. Or if I come in with another hairstyle the next week, oh, you're always changing your hair. And then it's like, oh, can I have a look? And then all of a sudden, before I've even had a chance to breathe, someone's like grabbing onto my hair to feel the texture of it or something. So those are kind of where the don't touch my hair bits come from. And there was an experiment that a Black lady did a few years ago, where she went into like a public space, like a park space. She started to go up to strangers and just started to touch their hair and to sort of see what the reaction would be. And I think that was, you know, her way of trying to say, this is kind of how it feels, this is what, you know, how it comes across. But for me, I think that the definition of microaggressions I take is from Psychology Today, and it's my favorite because it's kind of straight to the point and it's not sugar-coated, which is a bit like me. And that is that a microaggression is a subtle, often unintentional form of prejudice. And that's kind of it. So I would describe them as they are the mostly verbal evidence of people's stereotypes or assumptions or prejudices, and that are held about certain groups. And from a mental health point of view, although they're mostly seen as tongue-in-cheek, you know, quite harmless, if you think about a stereotype that isn't true about you, for example, if somebody kept attributing that stereotype to you, although you knew that you didn't hold that as a reality for yourself, over time, these little tongue-in-cheek, harmless things can really add up and start to affect people's self-esteem, your ability to engage and network in the workplace, and your power to be your authentic self, which is, as we know, is really super important. And then that then has a knock-on effect on your belonging within the workplace.
Absolutely. I love it that I love that you shared both of those definitions. Thank you for that. Especially that second one too. I want to highlight the often unintentional, right? So there's this absent-mindedness, there's this baked in cultural bias or assumption that someone might have that they are completely unaware of. And oftentimes some people think they are complimenting someone when they are actually causing stress and potentially triggering trauma.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what it is, because we've been hearing for a long time about a bias, and that bias, is unintentional. We've got unconscious bias, and that's how we talk about it. And whilst I accept that, there's a point where it's okay, so we know that it's unconscious, we know that we're not thinking about it, so what can we do to make sure that we're not offending people, triggering trauma, being rude, all of those types of things?
Yeah. So there's so many, this is a huge topic, right? And we have a limited amount of time. So I do want to invite our listeners too, if you have any questions for Dawn, feel free to drop those in the chat. And I'm sure Dawn would love to take a look at those. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep it going because I'm very passionate about this topic as well. So you already touched on how it can show up in the workplace in some small ways for, like you said, it can be often, we've had this assumption that it's like, oh, tongue in cheek, and then it starts to wear down on folks. And then it can be a daily stress. And then it can be people avoiding certain people at work, maybe. And then maybe it's their boss, maybe it's the person they have to work with. And then
maybe it's work, totally.
Maybe it's all of it, and then that person can show up looking like, oh, they don't work hard or whatever, and they're missing deadline. And it's because the thing that's actually the issue is not being addressed, right? So I'd love to hear more about how it can show up in the workplace on both sides. Yeah. And then maybe on, how can we address these things and help these folks, and maybe help educate folks that are sometimes often unconsciously causing these problems.
So that in the ways that they show up is mostly it's around comments that are made or questions that are asked, but sometimes they can be actions. So for example, if you're a manager and you decide not to suggest a woman for a particular project because it's labor intensive, now that's the bias piece of it. And then when she asks you why she wasn't put forward, you say something like, I thought it may be a bit much for you, so I saved you from it. I know you ladies and keeping your hair and nails intact. So it's that type of a thing that in the person's mind that's saying it, they're saying it in a, it's a fact. We know that you ladies, you like to, dress up and look nice. It may sound outrightly sexist to us, but comments such as this happen more and more, especially with social media kind of showing everyone all of our secrets as women, right? When it comes to hair and beauty and all of those things. So there's definitely a perpetuation of the assumption that women spend a lot of time and effort to look a certain way. And yes, ladies, some of us, we do like to make an effort, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to take on opportunities at work, right? So it's the separation of tying what you feel as a bias to what you're going to do within the workplace and how you exhibit that in conversations. So one of the things that I've personally experienced is I went on a work conference many years ago now, and everyone was going down to the swimming pool. And I said I wasn't going to go down to the swimming pool as I just gotten my hair done the day before. And I was met with the reply of, it's just a bit of water. Why do you need to worry about your hair all the time? And I was like, yes, I do have to worry about my hair. It takes effort and money to maintain. But that lack of even, I guess, kind of basic knowledge and understanding, which is where a lot of this comes from, of a Black woman's hair type, caused that macroaggression, I would call it, in my view. And there are many Black women that have that basic understanding of white here, but the reciprocal understanding needs to be better, I feel. And it seems like such a small thing, but it actually can become such a huge thing. And when it comes to things like women, one of my daughter's friends went to do an internship at a pharmaceutical company across the pond, actually, in the States during a gap year. And one of the male scientists said to her, asked her what she was studying. And she said, oh, I'm doing physics. And he said, oh, you want to be a teacher? And she said, oh, no, I want to be a physicist. And he said, oh, it's hard work, you know. And it was just, you know, would you have made men had it been a man? And then I have witnessed myself a couple, LGBT, a lesbian couple, and someone saying to them, which one of you is the man? And it's kind of those sorts of assumptions, stereotypes, and also people just not knowing how to be tactful, to be empathetic, to have understanding, and to think about how they would feel if they were on the receiving end of those comments. You know, we have other things for women being told we're aggressive, or other things like, oh, you don't have to be so sensitive. There's also the whole mansplaining thing, right? So that's when men, and you know, my other half does it to me all the time, when men try to explain something to us that they think that we don't understand, or they interrupt our explanation to give a better one. That's sort of another demonstration of microaggressions. But I do have to say that we all display microaggressive behavior at some point, me included. And, you know, I've caught myself saying stuff like, oh, you know, I feel so OCD today, everyone's mess is getting in my way, or saying things like I'm reading something and for some reason I can't catch what I'm reading, and I say, oh gosh, I feel like I'm a bit dyslexic. You know, this has been things that I may have said in the past, which is why it's not intended to be offensive, it's tongue-in-cheek. However, if you were someone that suffered with OCD or dyslexia, those comments will definitely feel insulting and make you feel less than. So it's really about being aware of our own behaviors, the things that we can just say off the bat, and kind of thinking before we speak.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And it sounds like my boyfriend and your other half would have fun mansplaining all day long to us. I love him. I've been with him a long time, but I'm just like, hun, I get it.
I get it. Exactly that.
Wow. So with these microaggressions that are showing up, and I love that your tip that you were just saying, like, okay, we need to like pause, we need to be aware, you know, we've all done it potentially, probably. I know I have as well, you know, these unconscious things. And as we keep moving forward, I feel like there's some big ones culturally that people start to get, oh, we don't say this, we say that. And so some people are trying to, you know, some people are doing their best. Some people just don't want to say the wrong thing. And then there's people and then we're kind of navigating the middle, right? There's shades of all of this. So how do people learn this? And what are ways that you help, you know, organizations, individuals, teach people that you find actually effective? You know, obviously folks can seek things out, this conversation included, I'm sure other resources that you have, but how can we continue to help educate folks in learning how to do this?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of helping organizations, I would say it's about thinking about things that, first of all, as a business, you're thinking about your bottom line. And so if people are victims of microaggressions and those kinds of things are happening, it can result in longer sickness absences, less engagement and harmony between employees, and therefore that then manifests in lower productivity levels. So you know, if you're an employer who's looking to create a culture of inclusion and belonging, then these micro and macroaggressive behaviors can really hamper that And so I would say for individuals, and you did say it earlier on, it's really about pausing. So taking a pause and thinking about what it is that you are trying to say before you say it, how it could be received, how it may look. It's all of that type of thing. And so I normally will deliver things like training, things like cultural training, becoming aware of what other people, different cultures within their gender, within their, because of their disability, etc. So a lot of the things that we look at is around you know, lack of courtesy and respect, and sometimes common sense. And so pausing, taking a minute, thinking about what you're going to say or do, how it could be taken, and then researching as well. So it's fine to ask questions about another person's way of life, but also there's loads on Google, right? So there's lots on Google that can tell you about what another person's culture is, etc. And so it's okay to research and look for that information on what I call internet land. What I would also say for in organizations, they should try to enable situations where employees can learn about other cultures, see individuals from various underrepresented groups, doing things that buck the stereotypes. So how do you champion women that are doing projects that are quite strenuous or stressful or have a lot of work? How are you showing that these people are doing these things so that everyone can see that there isn't just one way of doing stuff? And also allowing more opportunities for collaboration with others, making the project groups that you have more diverse. So I would say ask questions, be curious, but be respectful.
Right. I think that's ask questions, be curious, and be respectful. And I love what you said earlier, and I think it's tied to the being respectful part of doing your own research on internet land, because potentially, you know, maybe there's one person in the room that is that only type of that person in the room, and you have a lot of questions for them. They are not, it's not their job to be your teacher, to teach them about, you know, teach you about their culture, right? Because that can show up as a microaggression. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what it is. It's about not knowing. The example I gave you earlier on about Black women's hair, or Black people's hair, that is an example of where just a little bit of understanding about that when water touches my hair, it literally shrinks up into a ball like this. And then it takes me hours to detangle. Having that, you know, bit of understanding would stop so much misunderstanding when it comes to that.
Yeah. So here we are talking about the folks that maybe are unaware of certain things. Talk to me about can you talk to me about the other side? And for folks that are receiving these microaggressions, maybe sporadically, maybe daily, how can folks that are in these positions, these underrepresented groups, potentially respond to these microaggressions in the workplace? What does one do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So up until this point, we have mostly just let things go. And this is because it can be emotionally draining to confront microaggressions. And we can also start to question our rights to feel offended and reinforce beliefs that we're not safe wherever we are. But you can, I would always say to people to choose to do one of the following. You can respond immediately, which allows you to deal with it while the details of whatever the person has done is still fresh. But if you are in the moment in your emotions, that also can then play a part. And that understanding, which is what you're trying to get from the other person, may not be achieved. So whilst doing things whilst fresh is important to correct inappropriate behavior, you have to balance how ready you feel at the time to deal with the matter without anger or other negative emotion. Or you could respond later and address the person privately at a later point to explain why the microaggression was offensive. But then you need to be aware that the follow-up conversation will require you to help that other person to remember what they did, first of all, and then to appreciate the impact that it had on you. And if you leave too long of a gap between that, they may think you're being petty. But it may be a better way to deal with it than in the moment. I just suggest to people to just use your discernment, your intuition, your gut, whatever it is that you call it, and determine how much of an investment that you want to make in addressing the microaggression. So addressing microaggressions, it should be empowering. It should make you feel like, you know, you're standing up for yourself, and you shouldn't do it under pressure. So consider the importance of the issue and the relationship, more importantly, between you and that person. If you have a relationship with them, then avoiding the issue is probably going to be the wrong approach. I would say allow yourself to feel what you feel, whether it's anger, it's disappointment, it's frustration, it's aggravation, it's confusion, embarrassment, exhaustion, or something else. Any emotion is legitimate, and it should factor into your decision about whether you should, how to, and when to respond.
Wow, that is so, I'm going to use your own word here. That is empowering, that that bit of advice here, that structure. And what's interesting to me, what's standing out right now is actually both sides need to start with the same thing, which is pausing,
Yes.
right? Because you're talking about, you say, oh, I'm feeling these ways. I need to check in and see how I feel. If I'm too emotional right now, this might not be the most empowering time to address it, unfortunately. And to feel my feelings, or for that person to feel their feelings. Because you said, as you mentioned earlier, the mode of survival has been brush it off for a long time. And then you're met with gaslighting. We didn't say that word, but that's when, you know, you're feeling something and someone is trying to convince you that it's something else.
Yeah.
And that then shows up all the time if it's not being addressed. Especially, I love this window of opportunity that you mentioned. You know, it's like one version is do it in the moment. If you feel like it'll be an empowering thing, do your check-in, assess, is this a safe space? Because if it's one person in let's say a group meeting, well, maybe you're not going to address it in front of the whole company, but you might sidebar with that person afterwards, and that gives you time. But that becomes such a complex moment, right? If you're experiencing something and you're in the room and it just happens, you know, that's so hard for that restraint of tongue in that moment, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I think that's kind of, it's such a personal thing to the person on the receiving end. It's such a personal thing. And I think because it is, you know, these things have been happening for such a long period of time. We talk about misogyny, we talk about all of those things, that's been going on forever, right? So, you know, it can be quite an emotional thing. And I think, so that example that I gave you earlier on about the assumption that the person made about who was the man in the lesbian couple relationship, I think for a lot of people from the LGBTQ plus community, it's been such I guess a long thing of them being misunderstood, of them bearing the brunt of people's stereotypes and their prejudices and all of the rest of it, that I saw the person, when they asked them the question, which one is the man, they immediately said, what on earth are you saying? Who are you talking to? It was that sort of a response. And we have to understand that about ourselves, is that it is a lot of pressure. We are in a cooking pot, for want of a better expression, of prejudice, stereotypes, bias, all of these things that are coming at us and that we've had to kind of shut up and deal with for a long time. So we just need to be aware of that when we are using our power to speak out about, you know, what we will and will not accept and what our boundaries are.
Absolutely. It makes me think of this old phrase when we're talking about checking in with our emotions and our reactivity. If it's hysterical, it's historical, right? So if I am like, oh, what's wrong with you? Like, why, you know, like if I'm coming back, you know, I'm ready to fight, you just hit a trigger, because that is an old wound. You just twisted the knife in something and suddenly we're in a fight, you know?
Yeah, exactly that. And that's not what we want. What we're trying to do is to not play into, because then the next thing you get is, oh, you was an aggressive woman, you was too sensitive, you was, when we come off of emotion, that energy is met by emotion. And you know, if we've allowed the emotion to display, I don't like to say negative and positive, but in a less than helpful way, we're probably going to find a less than helpful way comes back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're almost out of time, Dawn. I could talk to you all day, and I would love to at some point. So please come back to Power to Fly and let's chat more. Maybe we can host, like, you know, a longer session with you. I would love that. Do you hear me, Power to Fly? And if Dawn will have us, we would love to have you. Can you, in these last couple minutes, maybe touch on what some of the businesses and individuals can do to avoid these cultural misunderstandings and microaggressions? Just give us some tips for both sides as we wrap up here.
Yeah. So I think for individuals, the first thing that I would say to the individuals that are receiving that is also to be your authentic self. People are not going to learn about you unless you are you. So I would say be your authentic self. For those individuals that are on the, I guess, the giving end, or who could be microaggressive towards somebody, it's about accepting people for their authentic self and recognize and really hold an awareness that there are vast differences in cultures, in the way that people present, in what people think of as traditional roles and traditional ways of being. So as well as the person from the underrepresented group being their authentic self, is asking for the people that are receiving that to accept that there are differences. And then for organizations, I think it's about being loud and proud about your diversity of your organization, or that you're on a path to that diversity, and to be very open and frank about microaggressions, about the fact that they happen. Give people examples like we're doing here so that people understand what they are, and then also help them with ways to foster that cultural and that all of that other understanding.
Thank you for that, Dawn. And thank you for making the time today. This has been so great. Can you share with us how folks can stay connected with you, resources that you'd like to, and anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. My name is Dawn Morton-Young on LinkedIn. Also called the Diverse Leaders Coach. So you can find me as that as well. My website is www.dawnmortonyoung.com. And I will be launching actually in January my mentoring program, which is for Black and Asian leaders, women leaders and founders. And so it will be 6 months in a container with other like-minded people, and basically looking at how you can smash through your career goals by embracing your differences rather than hiding them. So yeah, you can find out all about that either by emailing me contact@dawnmortonyoung.com or coming to the website and putting in a contact request.
Amazing. Dawn Morton-Young, thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your great day. But you just shine a light wherever you go, I can tell. So it's getting brighter over there on the other side of the pond. So yes. I hope you enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Hunter. Bye, everyone.
Bye.